One of the easiest ways to annoy someone is to waste their time and effort, especially considering that a lot of time could have been better spent doing stuff like going around a roundabout repeatedly. Low-key, I would have had more enjoyment out of doing that than playing this campaign. A circle of mundane tasks and a shooting gallery that even a 4-year-old would get bored of because the only skill required is to just move forward on the stick and pull the trigger when the enemy walks in front of you. If you couldn't tell by the beginning parts of this video, this is not going to be a video for you if you're a person that's pro Destiny and it's perfect. Just saying, I would click off now before you get horribly triggered or annoyed. I don't honestly care. This commentary is going to try to proactively focus on the campaign, also known as a series of unfortunate events in my case. But there will be some points made about adventures and world quests towards the end, since they are connected to what I would like to call the narrative of this content. Anyway, girls and boys, grab your light like it's a rave gone wrong, because it's time to talk about D2's story. Oh, and spoilers for people in the audience that actually care and haven't already clicked off the video. If you've already seen my D2 beta video, then you'll know I already talked about what problems I had with the first story mission in the game. And sadly, you're going to hear about me moan and complain about that again. And if not, and you don't want to watch a 15-minute video because you're dismantling a device, since we can't say the B word, huh? Can we, YouTube? And listening to this in the background, the short version is, it doesn't make sense. No, honestly, it doesn't. And this is a consistent theme throughout the entire game. Not to the extent that Destiny 1 was, a horribly uncohesive mess that was strung together because they fired the lead writer and crap. But actual story parts don't make sense if you slightly use a brain cell. Example A. Oh no, we're being attacked by an invading army we could have never foreseen. No, that's borderline impossible. And before you say that, but the transmats and satellites went down. We still have Guardians stretched all across the solar system right now, so that's pretty hard to believe that this happened. It's like in most modern horror movies where they have to make some type of weird plot device to make phones not work or have no Wi-Fi, except instead of having phones all around you, you have people all around you. Like, literally, they're right next to you in this horror situation. It's kind of hard to not notice anything happening next to you. It's like having a rope tied around your ankle. You can't flinch without someone knowing. And this is where a lot of the campaign tends to fall flat. And by that, I mean flat off a cliff. Because the justifications for how things happen sometimes don't add up with what's happening. Kind of like if you got kicked in the leg and started bleeding out of your eyes. One of these things is, it definitely shouldn't be happening with the other. Other smaller examples that I might get into a little bit later in the video are things like, why does the Cabal need to sneak up on us? Why is a bumbling mute chosen over all the other Guardians, hell, even the Vanguard leaders, to basically become Jesus and bring us all to salvation? I know I wasn't expecting much, but I was expecting a little bit better. I could bring up the fact that your ghost is still alive after how the Traveler is disconnected from you, and since your ghost is literally part of the Traveler, that doesn't make sense, but as an afterthought, I think it relates to the fact that the speaker said something about light existing in all places. But since that's not really touched on other than that one scene, I'm not going to touch on it myself. Hey, I've got to do things, you got to do things. We should probably roll through this video as quickly as possible for everyone's sake. Especially mine. I'm only using a few examples and they're in the beginning because for the most part after this next section I'm about to talk about, the story literally goes on autopilot and rushes you through as fast as possible. I'm sure Speedy effing Gonzalez would be rolling in his grave right now. Aside from some of the plot points being as logical as swimming in a vat of acid, some things make some sense, like the idea that because of the fall of the city, there would be a reasonable amount of PTSD among Guardians, especially in their leadership. This idea of what are we without our light? Remember this, it'll be important in a bit. And all the plot holes and bad reasoning weren't really the thing I found unpleasant during the campaign. That mantle instead was taken by the world without light tagline that I almost rolled myself into a seizure saying. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you've most likely never seen a commercial for Destiny 2 then. I knew, I swore to people, that this is gonna amount to little more than dribble off a dog's mouth, but in all honesty, I was partially wrong. And boy did I not suffer more for it. So after Gaul knocks you comatose off a spaceship, thousands of feet in the air, yeah I know, you survived this with no problems by the way. Well, considering it is a Bungie game, I guess it makes sense they have it hard on for inconsistencies with height survivability. Halo had this problem, and I believe some of their other games have this problem, but whatever. I wish that was the only big problem plot-wise in this game, but unfortunately, it's not. You wake up weakened and find your ghost stating the obvious that, hey, the giant ball of coke ain't popping no more and you gonna have to go and skedaddle before the bads come and get you. All joking aside, the segment that follows this was really well done, to the extent that I was actually starting to feel for our mute protagonist that I could actually care less about. The music was exquisite, and the way this whole entire segment presents the player is through glitchy ghost audio and your surroundings. This theme of loss was prevalent throughout this mission. Honestly, they probably didn't even need to have the obvious text the ghost said about them hunting guardians and stuff like this, because the atmosphere alone was solid enough to just give you that feeling of hopelessness, which was, like I said, well done. It was a good opener for the world without light. For that brief moment, I actually started to believe that this game was going to impress me, and that all what I thought the campaign was going to be was going to be a complete lie. Until a mission later, where all that build-up was broken with the force of a semi hitting an aluminum can. In about 50 minutes of gameplay, you get your powers back. The ones that were just broken over your head, metaphorically speaking, with you having to strive to get back and prove your worth receiving, are obtained in less time than 2 SpongeBob episodes. And that's with me taking as much time as possible to literally sniff the flowers and experience this segment. And once again, as much as this game likes to answer questions, it never answers important ones. Why is it that we, the entirely mute, relatively mundane guardian, is chosen over all the other guardians, or I guess the other 2 that aren't with you at the time, to be chosen by the Traveler to become Guardian Jesus, the protag? You barely even have to try to get your powers back, and the game doesn't even treat it like it's a point worth exploring, which is the hilarious thing about it, because it seems like it wants to explore it with every other character other than you, who, if they wanted to make the center of the game, they kind of failed at. I guess it just boils down to one simple question. Why do we deserve the light? There's a line the speaker says, in a better story, this would actually mean something. Devotion inspires bravery. Bravery inspires sacrifice. Sacrifice leads to death. A character goes into one place without their powers, barely struggles, being a normal human exo or whatever other awoken race, and receives the grace for just basically showing up. Then we continue the rest of the campaign without struggle ourselves and watch as other people much braver than us get shafted. Zavala, who went to establish a beachhead on Titan. Cade, who went to Nessus to discover a Vex warp tech to get into the city. Ikora, who actually, she kind of does run off for a bit. But after that, the first mission on Io, she's basically active trying to find a way to stop the Annihilator, instead of blowing it up. Gaul does seem to be right about one thing. Your character really doesn't deserve the light, at least in my opinion. However, some do, and I'll talk about that later. And by later, I mean right now. Mainly because if I let this game sink me any more down into a pessimistic hole, I probably won't ever play it again. Aside from the mental gymnastics applied to perceiving many of the story points, I think I made this point earlier actually, it's still cohesive. You'll play from start to finish in a relatively contained and completed plot. So bravo! Your plot is no longer an incoherent mess for your target audience. It's still, like the economy, disappointing. However, on a mild high note, the Vanguard. You know, the leaders of your city, don't worry, the game never explained them in the previous one. We don't count that one, and apparently the writers definitely don't either. Anyway, this game actually does a pretty well job of making characters for these people. And the interactions and motivations are pretty well laid out and done to what I would say is acceptable. Unfortunately, at the same time, the story is also wrote with the intention of gorging you with their motivations in about 2 minutes or so, before flipping their characters back to autopilot like it's D1 again. Almost like a starving person that won't shut up. You'd struggle to not know what they wanted, if you know what I mean. For example, I really liked Hawthorne throughout the game. You get an example of what a far more interesting character would act like being an ordinary human in this world. You know, in a greater game, this would be a very good dichotomy with your character yourself. However, this isn't a better game. Hawthorne isn't a guardian, and to a certain extent, neither is the Vanguard now. Watching how they deal with the situation, albeit rushed and treated like the black sheep in the meadow, I don't know. Guess it wasn't explosive enough, a little bit too methodical for them. I guess they put it in the chopping block. Speaking of hyped up explosives, yep, there we go. We just lost that monetization. Whatever. The retcons in this game. And one in particular that really illustrates the amount of redo and retconning they were really trying to push with this new game, including, I would say, the whole series by extension.
Or is this some other war mind?
There is only one war mind, but Rasputin is not here on Io. I believe he's been marooned on Earth ever since his network fragmented.
Now, if you follow lore in the slightest bit, this is going to sound a little bit weird to you, because it's basically a misinformation. Because it's basically misinformation. Because it's basically a retcon to something that was unnecessary and also completely untrue. Rasputin was not and is not the only war mind that has ever existed. Charlemagne ring a bell to anyone that is in the lore community? It's actually kind of funny that I haven't seen too many videos talking about this, and it's something that I would probably consider relatively important to the overall plot of this game, and I guess story to the whole series. But yeah, not too much outrage or even comments about it. Maybe people just haven't noticed, because there's a lot of retcons that aren't really good in this game. I mean, I guess it's just a sign that they tried to rush everything and put it all together real quickly from the mess that was the first game, but a lot of the first game charm, I would argue, was the fact that even though the plot points were relatively disconnected, I say relatively, they were completely disconnected, they still had some interesting avenues to go into, especially if you read the Grimoire. However, it was never really put in the game, so obviously many people didn't care, and I'm sure that's why a lot of people haven't noticed that they're just part of the core player base. But again, just surprised a lot of the lore people aren't flipping out about this stuff. Another one I just remembered off the top of my head because this is post-recording. The speaker just pretty much dies at the end of the game and nobody addresses it, like he didn't ever exist, or like they omitted the fact that the speaker was like one of the more prevalent plot points they literally stated in the beginning of the game. Huh. Rushed writing? Maybe. Bad writing? Most definitely. But I'll try to hurry along because I've already spent more time than a calculus question talking about this game, and I'm still a physics question away from being done. Quick, what's the limit of my exponential annoyance as time goes to infinity? It's infinity. That was a math joke. Exactly 4 people in the audience got it, and twice as many just clicked off the video. In pain hearing. Not gonna lie, this probably seems like a very weird jump. I actually had a point to make about simplicity and instant gratification in this video, but since the rewrites and everything else are longer than the Black Friday line, you'll have to forgive me for waiting for the full review to talk about it. Also, I'm gonna probably regret having used those 2 jokes, the title and also the joke I just made, because they would have probably been a lot better later, but whatever. This brings us to adventures, or as my friend who loves this game actually puts it, strung together patrol missions, which I would call D1 missions myself. But hey, I'll try to make this section real quick. But basically there's 3 types of side missions, and no, I'm not calling them side quests, because that would be like calling dirt piles sandcastles. Get back to me when you've played games like Witcher 3, Borderlands, or Skyrim. You can participate in boring scan missions, boring three-wave missions, and boring combinations of the two gameplay-wise with actually interesting dialogue. I'll leave it up to you, discussion-wise, which one of those is the most prevalent in the game, but it shouldn't be that hard, judging on Destiny's previous track record. Basically, the only importance they serve is to lengthen the already short campaign. However, and this is an important fact, two of the most genuine enjoyable experiences you will have are in the Lost Sectors and World Quests, provided you have the slightest interest in the way maps are designed, basically the decor, because Lost Sectors were definitely inflated, like the rest of most parts of this game, to be something they were not. Like dungeons with puzzles and things like that. No, it's just you walk in, kill a trash mob, you're done. Granted, it can be fun the first couple times you go into a different Lost Sector, but if you go into the same Lost Sector to farm or something, you'll be... The other ones are World Quest, which actually deserve the title quest or side quest to them. World Quest are like adventures, except they actually cared when they were making them, at least to the extent of making 3-part stories that only 4 of consist in the game. So, if you want something to complain about in the future, you should definitely be voicing to the devs that you want more of this and less of adventures, because right now there are, like I said, only 4 world quests active in the entire game. The rest are side objectives, and they're generally as mundane as licking a frozen pole. But again, no one at the moment will probably say anything that's a non-critique Destiny channel or Bungie channel. All of this being said, and the multiple jokes I've made about the length of this, it's about time to end this video and have my final thoughts on the matter in terms of story. Destiny 2's story can be enjoyable, provided you're okay with maybe not the most intellectually stimulating storyline. It doesn't require you to care past getting your stuff back, and it doesn't require you to think too much past bad guy is bad. Which is exactly what I want after a few Pop-Tarts in the stomach and Red Bull down the guzzle. Mediocre at best without stepping on any shoes. I guess Destiny truly has reached AAA standards. Since the video is nearing its end, like I said earlier, I don't know why I restated that, I'm going to ask that you share your personal thoughts, especially with what you like about the game, because I think the campaign is mediocre, along with most of the non-in-game activities, but it's not as shameful as Destiny 1 in terms of cohesiveness and playability, I should say. I prefer the gunplay in this game a lot more. I don't like that it's slower, but On another note, the AI is dumber than sin. It's really stupid. Where the only difficulty that comes into play happens to do with either light level disadvantage or sheer amount of damage the enemies will put out toward you. Most tactics include running at you with their head ready to get sniped, or running at you, going in cover, and then running at you again, ready to get sniped.
The fallen.
I'm doing a few giveaways on this channel. One is a Patreon only, which I believe is going to be the Cold Heart or the Cade one. I don't know. I might see what people want, which one they would prefer to be Patreon only. And the other ones will just be spread out randomly. That's like the other XP bonuses and stuff like that that I got and were sent by some people, as well as with the game. All the non-Patreon drawings will be done at the end of this week, so make sure you leave a comment and are subscribed to the channel. And the Patreon one will be done at the end of the month. And so I can avoid questions like, what's your schedule and such, and oh, when am I going to get an update? Please press that bell so you can get any updates from the channel and new content I post. And if you want to help out a fellow living creature with life problems in this world, go ahead and check out my Patreon. And with that, I'll see you in the next thoughts on video.